What if the real secret of Rockefeller's empire wasn't oil at all, but distribution? Not the wells, not the refineries, not even the price wars, but the invisible network that carried oil across a nation before anyone else could even move a barrel. While his rivals fought over drilling rights, Rockefeller was building something they couldn't see. A circulatory system that would make every drop of oil in America pass through his veins. Cleveland, early 1870s. Most businessmen were still thinking locally, a few counties, a few rail lines, a few loyal customers. But Rockefeller stood over a map of the United States like a general before a campaign. To him, cities weren't markets, they were nodes, and every line between them could be controlled. His vision was simple, terrifying, and precise. If he could control the movement of oil, not just its creation, he could own the future. Pipelines, barges, tank cars, warehouses, agents, retail shops, every link in the chain, every hand that touched a barrel, each would serve one master: Standard Oil. America was vast, chaotic, and slow. Oil might flow easily out of the Pennsylvania ground, but getting it to the lamps of San Francisco was another matter entirely. Barrels leaked, roads broke, trains burned coal faster than profit, and every mile meant another middleman taking a cut. Rockefeller hated waste, not just of money, but of motion. He called it friction, and he spent his life removing it. Every unnecessary hand, every redundant route, every drop that didn't reach its buyer, eliminated. To him, distribution wasn't a cost, it was a weapon. He began with the railroads, the veins of the young industrial world. At first, oil traveled in barrels stacked inside freight cars, inefficient, messy, and expensive. So Rockefeller ordered something radical: steel tank cars built to carry oil in bulk. When rivals laughed, he didn't argue. He patented the design and scaled it quietly. Soon his tank cars rolled by the hundreds, sealed, efficient, and untouchable. They didn't just carry oil, they carried control. Every railroad that wanted a share of the oil trade had to negotiate with him. And those that didn't? They watched their freight yards go silent. Next came the storage depots. In city after city, Standard Oil quietly built massive warehouses along ports, rivers, and rail hubs. Each one looked independent, even local, but all were owned through shell companies and silent partners. From these depots, oil was distributed like blood through arteries, steady, invisible, unstoppable. Competitors could produce oil, yes, but if they tried to sell it, they'd find every distributor mysteriously out of space, every warehouse already committed. Standard didn't just build infrastructure, he built dependency. Standard's agents were unlike any other salesman in America. They didn't just sell barrels, they mapped territories, studied towns, memorized roads. Each carried ledgers filled with data: who bought oil, when, and at what price. They reported everything to Cleveland, weekly, sometimes daily. For Rockefeller, these reports were gold. They told where competitors sold, how much they charged, and where he could strike next. In 1877, Standard Oil knew more about America's oil trade than the U.S. government did. He turned information into a weapon years before anyone called it data. In an era before telegraphs reached every town, communication was slow, but Rockefeller's logistics weren't. He developed coded telegram systems for his agents. Each warehouse could redirect supply within hours. So when rivals tried to undercut him in one city, Standard could flood the market overnight. Prices collapsed, competition suffocated, and then the network quietly withdrew, leaving behind silence and control. To outsiders, it looked like coincidence. Inside Standard, it was choreography, a dance of oil, iron, and information. But even as he ruled the rails, he saw their weakness. They could strike back. Railroads could raise prices, leak data, favor rivals. So he began building a parallel system, pipelines. It was a slow rebellion. Farmers protested, rivals sabotaged, towns voted against him. But he persisted. Mile by mile, the pipes extended, under roads, across rivers, through private land. Soon, oil could move from well to refinery to port without ever touching a railroad track. He was creating the world's first fully integrated logistics web, decades before modern corporations dreamed of supply chains. When independent producers built the Tideway pipeline in 1879 to bypass Standard Oil, Rockefeller watched carefully. He didn't panic, he observed. Then, quietly, Standard bought into every terminal the pipeline touched. He didn't have to own the pipe. He just had to own where it ended. By the time competitors realized what happened, Tideway's oil still flowed right into Standard's tanks. Rockefeller had turned their rebellion into another artery of his empire. To unify this growing network, he created something else just as powerful as the pipes: trust. Not moral trust, corporate trust. A single structure binding dozens of companies, depots, and subsidiaries under one coordinated command. It looked decentralized, but it wasn't. Every office, from Buffalo to Baltimore, reported upward into a silent hierarchy. From the outside, America saw many independent brands of kerosene, but behind the curtains, they all belonged to one man. It was the first corporate web of its kind, the blueprint for modern multinational networks. To small-town merchants, Standard Oil felt like salvation at first. Reliable supply, fair prices, consistent quality. But slowly the warmth turned cold. Local distributors found themselves locked into exclusive contracts. Independent producers found no one left to sell to. And when the prices dropped, they dropped everywhere, except inside Rockefeller's books, where efficiency kept profits alive. By the 1880s, his network didn't just move oil. It defined the price of light in America. Rockefeller himself rarely appeared in public during this phase. No speeches, no ghosts. He let the network speak for him, the flow of oil, the silence of his rivals. He once said, "Competition is a sin only when it wastes God's creation." And in his mind, inefficiency was sin. Every town without a depot, every shipment delayed by weather, every barrel leaking on a dock, proof that man's greed stood in the way of divine order. To him, distribution wasn't just business. It was God's geometry, lines drawn across a chaotic nation, turning waste into symmetry. By 1885, if you could rise above America and look down from the clouds, you'd see his empire glowing across the landscape. Tank cars rolling east, barges floating downriver, warehouses stacked in every port. Lines of oil moved like veins under a living skin. And at the heart of it, Cleveland, the pulse, the mind, the quiet man with ledger and prayer book, watching his invisible web tighten around a continent. A rival once said after visiting one of Standard's distribution hubs, "It's not that he owns everything, it's that he's everywhere you need to be." And that was the point. Rockefeller didn't need to crush every opponent. He only needed to make their victory impossible. Every route led back to Standard. Every barrel sooner or later entered his system. Every profit had to pass through his gate. That's not monopoly. That's design. But even perfection carries a cost. As Standard's reach spread, public trust began to crack. Journalists whispered of corruption, of shadow ownership, of unfair contracts. To the people, the invisible web began to look less like order and more like a cage. Rockefeller didn't respond. He never defended himself in newspapers. He simply expanded further into the South, the Midwest, the coasts, until the cage became the market itself. By the time the century turned, Standard Oil's distribution network was unmatched, a living prototype for every modern system of logistics, supply, and corporate structure to come. When later empires studied efficiency, Ford, Amazon, even modern energy giants, they were following blueprints drawn in oil and ink by one man who believed chaos was sin. He built a web before the world even had a word for one.
So when history remembers John D. Rockefeller, it often speaks of wealth, monopoly, or power. But the truth is quieter and far more enduring. He built not just an empire of oil, but an empire of movement, where every road, rail, and river became his bloodstream. And long after his company was broken apart, the web he spun, the logic of efficiency, control, and silent coordination still defines the world we live in. Because Rockefeller didn't just build a business, he built a system.